The college auditorium buzzed with laughter and noise. It was the last day before winter break, and everyone was in a playful mood. Students joked, sang, and played random tunes on the old piano that stood in the corner of the room. The place smelled of coffee and fresh rain, sunlight falling through tall windows. Among the crowd sat a quiet girl named Lily. She always sat in the same corner alone, listening to others but never joining them. Her notebook rested on her lap, filled with small doodles of flowers and music notes. No one really noticed her, and she seemed fine with that. Jake, one of the most confident boys in the group, was the center of attention. He loved to make people laugh, even if it meant making fun of someone else, with his friends cheering him on. He looked around for a new target. His eyes landed on Lily, sitting silently, eyes lowered. He smirked. "Hey, Lily," he called out, loud enough for everyone to turn. "You're always sitting near that piano. You know how to play, or you just like staring at it?" The crowd chuckled. Lily froze, not expecting the attention. Her heart began to pound. She tried to smile politely, hoping the moment would pass, but Jake wasn't done. "Come on, give us a show," he laughed, pretending to play invisible keys in the air. His friends whistled and clapped. "Yeah, play something," someone shouted. Lily shook her head softly, whispering, "I can't." But her voice was too quiet to be heard over their teasing. Jake took a few steps forward, still smiling. "Don't be shy, it's just a piano. What's the worst that could happen?" he said jokingly. Everyone laughed again, and the sound of it made Lily's chest tighten. For a moment she wanted to run away, to leave the hall and never come back. But something inside her stopped her. She was tired of being invisible, tired of people assuming she was weak. Her fingers curled into fists. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping the floor. The laughter faded a little as people realized she was actually moving toward the piano. Jake raised his eyebrows, surprised. "Oh, we've got a brave one," he joked, but his voice was softer now. Lily walked to the piano, her shoes clicking softly on the wooden floor. The old instrument looked heavy and ancient, its black paint faded and keys slightly yellow. She ran her fingers across the surface, feeling the dust. Her reflection in the glossy lid looked nervous, eyes wide, lips pressed together. Her hands trembled as she sat down. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. Jake crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. His friends whispered, "She's actually gonna play." One girl laughed. "This should be funny." Lily took a deep breath. Her hands hovered above the keys but didn't move. The silence stretched. The laughter died completely for the first time. Jake's grin faded a little. He noticed her shoulders shaking, not from laughter but fear. Inside Lily's mind, memories started flooding back. She could almost hear her mother's voice, soft, warm, guiding her hands over the same keys years ago. "Music comes from the heart, Lily," her mother used to say. "Even when words fail, the heart still speaks." The memory hurt. The pain rose in her throat. She wanted to leave, but something inside her whispered, "Just one song." Her fingers pressed the first key. The note echoed through the empty space like a whisper in a church. Everyone fell silent. Jake tilted his head slightly, confused. The tone wasn't what he expected. It was gentle, deep, and filled with emotion. The next few notes followed, slow and careful. Each one seemed to tell a story of loss, of love, of something broken. The laughter that once filled the room was gone, replaced by quiet awe. Lily's world faded away. She no longer saw the students or the walls, only the piano and her memories. Her hands began to move faster, finding rhythm and emotion she hadn't felt in months. Jake's arms slowly dropped to his sides. His throat felt tight. His friends, once mocking, now stood completely still. No one dared to speak. Her music grew stronger, rising and falling like a heartbeat. It was beautiful, but there was something tragic inside it. A sadness that pulled at everyone's chest. Even those who didn't understand music could feel it. They could feel her. Then it happened. Her fingers slipped slightly. Her body tensed. She blinked, her breathing uneven. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. The music stumbled. Jake stepped forward, concern replacing his teasing smile. But Lily pressed another key, trying to continue. Her hands shook more violently. Her breathing turned shallow. Her chest rose and fell too fast. "Lily?" someone whispered, but she didn't hear. Her vision blurred. She tried to take another breath, but it didn't come. The piano sound faded as her hands froze above the keys. The laughter that began as a joke ended in silence so heavy it hurt. Jake felt cold, His heart pounded as he took a step closer, whispering her name. No one laughed anymore. No one smiled. They just watched, realizing that the joke they started had gone too far. The room that had once echoed with laughter now stood frozen in fear and guilt, and Jake, for the first time in his life, wished he had never opened his mouth. The sound of Lily's last note still hung in the air when her body went still. For a moment no one moved. Everyone stared at her pale face, her shaking hands resting on the piano keys. Then suddenly her shoulders slumped forward, and her head bowed. The silence shattered. Someone gasped. Another screamed her name. Jake rushed forward without thinking, his heart pounding like a drum in his ears. He grabbed her shoulder gently. Lily. Hey Lily, are you okay? Her body trembled as she tried to breathe. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Jake panicked. Someone call the nurse, he shouted, his voice, once filled with jokes and laughter, now cracked with fear. The group of students that had once laughed and cheered now stood frozen. Guilt spreading across every face, two boys ran out to get help while Jake knelt beside her. Lily's eyes fluttered open for a second, unfocused. She looked around as if she wasn't in the same world anymore. A tear slipped down her cheek. Mom, she whispered so faintly that only Jake heard it. Then her eyes rolled back and she went limp. Jake's throat tightened. Stay with me, Lily, he said desperately. You'll be fine. Just breathe, okay? But she didn't respond. Within minutes, a teacher and the school nurse burst into the room. The teacher's calm but firm voice cut through the panic. Give her space. Everyone moved back. Jake stumbled backward, his hands trembling. He had never felt so useless before. The nurse checked Lily's pulse and breathing. She's having a panic attack, severe, the nurse said quickly. Call the paramedics. The room, once filled with mocking laughter, was now filled with whispers of fear. The old piano sat between them all, silent and cold. Its black surface reflected their frightened faces. As the nurse tried to help Lily, Jake stared at the piano keys. The same ones he had dared her to touch. They now looked like the sharp edges of guilt. When the paramedics arrived, they moved quickly, placing an oxygen mask over Lily's face. Her breathing slowly steadied, but her eyes remained closed. Jake watched as they lifted her onto a stretcher. Each step they took felt like a hammer to his chest. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. As they carried her out, the crowd parted. No one made a sound. The sound of the stretcher wheels on the floor echoed louder than any laughter had before. Jake stood there, frozen, staring at the door long after it closed behind her. The teacher turned to the students, her expression stern and full of disappointment. What happened here? She asked sharply. Silence. No one spoke. No one could. Jake swallowed hard, feeling every eye turned toward him. He didn't need anyone to answer. He already knew the truth. He sank into one of the chairs, his legs weak. The same people who had cheered him moments ago now avoided his eyes. One girl whispered, "He didn't mean to." Another said, "It was just a joke." But the words sounded empty. Even to them, Jake buried his face in his hands, replaying the moment she touched the piano, the way her music had filled the room, the way her breathing had broken apart. He had thought it was just fun, harmless teasing, but now it felt like he had broken something fragile, something precious. Later that day, when everyone had gone, Jake stayed behind. The janitor came in to clean, but he didn't move. The room smelled faintly of polish and dust, and the piano sat there like a silent witness. He walked toward it slowly. Every step echoed against the empty walls. He reached out and pressed one key. The note rang out softly. It was the same tone she had started with, but now it sounded lonely. He could almost hear her playing again, the soft rise and fall, the emotion hidden behind each note. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, it was like time had turned back. He saw her again, sitting there, her fingers moving gracefully, her face calm yet full of sorrow. He didn't understand how someone could play something so beautiful and so heartbreaking at the same time. Then his chest tightened again, remembering how she'd stopped breathing. The memory hit him like a punch. He pulled his hand away from the piano as if it had burned him. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything, her eyes, her voice, her last whispered word. Mom. He wanted to know why she'd said that, why that piano had affected her so deeply. He felt he needed to understand, maybe even fix what he'd done the next morning. He went to the nurse's office, hoping to hear that she was fine. The nurse gave him a tired look. "She's stable," she said. "But she's resting now. That was a serious." "Do you know what caused it?" Jake hesitated. I made her play the piano," he admitted, as a joke. The nurse frowned. "That girl's been through a lot lately. You shouldn't have done that." Her voice wasn't angry, but full of sadness. Jake nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He walked out of the office and looked down the hallway that led to the music room. Everything felt different now. The laughter that once made him feel alive now made him sick. He realized how easy it was to hurt someone without knowing their story. As he stood there lost in thought, a small notebook fell from his jacket pocket. It was hers. He had picked it up without realizing when she collapsed. The cover was old and slightly torn. On the first page, in soft handwriting, was written, "For Mom, so I never forget your songs." Jake's eyes blurred. He flipped through the pages and saw sketches of piano keys, little notes, and pieces of lyrics. One line caught his eye. "I can't play anymore, it hurts too much." He closed the notebook slowly, his hands trembling. The truth hit him like a storm. That piano wasn't just an instrument for her. It was a memory, a wound, something sacred, and he had turned it into a joke outside. The winter wind howled softly against the windows. Jake stood there for a long time, holding the notebook close to his chest. The laughter, the teasing, the noise, all gone, replaced by one promise in his heart. He would never forget her song, and he would never let his words be weapons again. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of a heart monitor. A thin beam of sunlight slipped through the blinds, falling softly on Lily's pale face. Her hands rested weakly on the white blanket, fingers twitching slightly as if still playing invisible keys. Jake stood in the doorway, unsure if he should step inside. His chest felt heavy, his throat dry. He'd been standing there for almost 10 minutes, watching her breathe, afraid to move closer. When he finally gathered the courage, he stepped in slowly. His shoes made almost no sound on the tiled floor, but to him every step echoed like thunder. A nurse looked up from her clipboard, recognizing him. "She's awake, but weak," the nurse said quietly. "Don't stay too long, okay?" Jake nodded, grateful but nervous. He pulled up a chair beside her bed. Lily's eyes fluttered open. They were tired, distant, like she was still lost somewhere between the piano's melody and the cold silence that followed. When she saw Jake, her expression shifted slightly. Not anger, not hate, just confusion. "Why are you here?" she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, fragile, like a leaf brushing against glass. Jake swallowed hard. I came to say I'm sorry." The words felt too small, too weak for what he'd done. "I didn't know," he continued. "I thought it was just a joke. I didn't mean to." He trailed off, unable to finish. Lily looked away, her eyes tracing the ceiling. For a moment she didn't speak, then softly she said, "It wasn't your fault." Her words surprised him. "You didn't know," she added. "No one did." Her hands trembled slightly, and she pressed them together as if trying to keep them still. "I shouldn't have played," Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" he asked gently. Her eyes glistened as she stared at the small window across the room. "My mom used to teach me," she said, her voice shaking. "She said music was a way to heal the heart. When I was little, we'd sit at that same piano every evening. I'd play something wrong and she'd laugh, then fix my fingers. Her laughter was the melody I loved most." She paused, her lips trembling. "But she got sick last year, very sick. The last thing she told me before she passed was, 'Keep playing. Lily.'" Jake's heart ached with every word. He wanted to say something, anything, but he couldn't. Lily took a shaky breath. "I tried," she said quietly. "But after she was gone, I couldn't touch the piano. Every time I saw one, I felt like I was drowning. Like the music would pull me under, remind me she's gone." Her eyes filled with tears. "That's why I said no when you asked me to play. I wasn't scared of you. I was scared of the sound." Jake felt the weight of her pain like a stone pressing down on his chest. He looked down, ashamed. "Lily, I didn't know, I swear, if I had—" She stopped him with a small shake of her head. "You couldn't have known," she said softly. "You just saw a quiet girl sitting alone. I don't blame you for that." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The heart monitor beeped steadily, filling the silence between them. Jake stared at her fragile hands, the same hands that had played something so beautiful it silenced a whole room, and then nearly took her breath away. Finally, he said, "You shouldn't have had to go through that alone." Lily smiled faintly. Everyone goes through something alone, Jake, she said. That's life. We all wear smiles so no one sees the cracks underneath. Her words cut deep, and Jake realized how shallow he had been. He had laughed at people to feel stronger, to hide his own insecurities. But now, sitting beside Lily, he felt small. He wasn't the confident guy everyone cheered for. He was just a boy who'd hurt someone without meaning to. After a moment, he asked, "Do you think you'll ever play again?" Lily didn't answer right away. She looked down at her fingers, pale and trembling. "I don't know," she whispered. "It still hurts, but maybe one day I will." For her. Her eyes turned toward the sunlight slipping through the blinds, because she'd want me to. Jake nodded slowly. "If you ever do, I'd like to hear it," he said quietly. Not because of a joke, but because it matters. For the first time, a real smile touched Lily's lips. "Small but genuine, maybe," she said softly. "One day," the nurse returned, gently reminding Jake it was time to leave. He stood up reluctantly. "I'll visit again, if that's okay," he said. Lily nodded. "Okay." As he walked out, Jake felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just guilt anymore, it was understanding. A strange kind of awakening. He realized that words could hurt deeper than fists, and laughter, when careless, could cut sharper than knives outside the hospital. The air felt different, colder, quieter. He walked slowly through the parking lot, thinking about everything Lily had said. The sunset painted the sky in orange and pink, reminding him of the warm glow that used to fill the music room before everything went wrong. When he got home, he couldn't stop thinking about the piano. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and typed, "How to play piano." His fingers hovered over the keys. Hesitating, he had no idea why he was doing it. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of something deeper. He watched a video of simple notes, basic melodies, and followed along. The sounds were uneven, clumsy. Nothing like Lily's graceful touch, but still he tried. Each note echoed softly through his room. As the music filled the air, Jake thought about Lily's mother, about her laughter, about the way Lily's hands had trembled but still played something beautiful. He realized now that music wasn't just sound, it was memory, emotion, life, and pain all blended together. That night, he wrote something down in his notebook. "Apologies mean nothing if you don't change afterward." He looked at those words again and nodded to himself. From that day, Jake made a quiet promise he would never use laughter to hurt again. He would learn to listen, to see the people behind the silence. And one day when Lily was ready, he would be there, not to ask her to play, but to listen when she finally did. The next morning, Jake walked through the quiet school halls, his heart still heavy from what he'd learned about Lily's past. The laughter and noise that once filled these corridors were gone, replaced by uneasy silence. Rumors had spread fast. Everyone now knew what happened in the music room, but no one talked about it out loud. It was as if the entire campus was holding its breath, afraid to speak her name. When Jake reached the door of the music room, it was slightly open. He hesitated for a moment before pushing it. The hinges creaked softly. The sunlight poured in through the tall windows, landing on the piano, still the same, still dusty, still carrying the memory of that terrible day. On top of the piano, he saw something small and familiar, Lily's diary, the one he had found and returned to her yesterday. But this time it was open, as if someone had read it again. He stepped closer, curiosity and guilt battling in his chest. He knew it wasn't right to look, but his eyes caught a few words written in delicate handwriting. "I want to play again, but I'm scared. Every note reminds me she's gone." Jake's throat tightened. He closed the diary gently, almost like he was afraid to hurt it. Suddenly, he heard a voice behind him. "You came back too." Jake turned quickly. It was Lily's best friend, Mia, a quiet girl who rarely spoke to anyone. She looked tired, her eyes red as if she had cried a lot. "She used to come here after school," Mia said softly. "Every single day, just to sit near the piano. Not to play, just to sit," she said. Being near it made her feel close to her mom. Jake looked at the piano again, the black keys reflecting the sunlight. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I didn't know any of this." Mia nodded. "No one did," she said. "You weren't the first to make fun of her, but you were the last after her mom died." She stopped talking to anyone, even me for a while. Her voice trembled. That piano was her world. It's where her mom taught her everything, every scale, every song. Jake felt something twist inside him. That's why she fainted that day, he said slowly. It wasn't just fear, it was pain. Mia nodded again, tears glistening in her eyes. Her mother's last performance was here. In this room, she whispered. She was already sick then. But she wanted Lily to see her play one last time. Lily told me once, when Mom played that night. I didn't realize it was goodbye. Jake stood in silence. The air felt heavy with memories. The piano seemed to hold ghosts of love, loss, and music that never faded. He finally said, I want to help her, but I don't know how. Mia gave him a small, sad smile. Just be there, she said. You don't need to fix it, you can't. But maybe if she sees you care, really care, it might help her find her way back to music. That night, Jake sat at his desk again. The small keyboard he had borrowed from the school rested in front of him. He placed his fingers on the keys, trying to remember the simple chords he had practiced before. The sounds were soft, clumsy, but honest. He wasn't doing it for himself. He was doing it for her. He wanted to understand, to feel even a little of what she felt when she played. Over the next few days, he visited her in the hospital every afternoon, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with nothing but silence. They didn't talk much, but she didn't ask him to leave. That alone was enough one afternoon. When he entered her room, Lily was sitting up, her diary open on her lap. You're back, she said softly. Her voice was still fragile, but there was a small spark in her eyes. I wanted to thank you, she added. Jake frowned. For what? She smiled faintly. For listening, most people don't. He sat down beside her bed. I wish I had listened earlier, he said. I wish I'd seen the pain behind your silence. Lily looked down at her hands. I used to think people like you were cruel, she admitted quietly. But maybe you just didn't know better. Jake nodded. Ashamed, you're right, he said. I didn't. But I want to be better now. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the clock. Then Lily whispered, You know what's strange? I keep hearing the music in my dreams, the song I played that day. Jake looked at her. What does it sound like? She smiled sadly. Like her voice, she said. Soft, distant, but always there. Days turned into weeks. Lily slowly regained her strength, but she still refused to touch a piano. Every time someone suggested it, she shook her head. Not yet, she would say. Then one morning, she received a small package at her hospital bed. There was no name on it, just a small note that read, For when you're ready to play again. Inside was a small music box carved from dark wood. When she opened it, it played a simple tune, soft and imperfect but familiar. It was the same melody she had played the day she collapsed. But slower, gentler. She looked at the box, tears filling her eyes. She didn't need to guess who sent it that afternoon. She asked the nurse to take her to the hospital's small therapy room. There in the corner stood an old upright piano. Her fingers trembled as she touched the keys. For a long time she didn't play, just sat there. Breathing, then slowly she pressed one key. The note was soft, fragile, but it echoed in her heart like a whisper from the past. Back at school, Jake sat alone in the empty music room, staring at the same piano. He didn't know that miles away in a quiet hospital, Lily was touching the same kind of keys, breathing life back into the sound she thought she'd lost. And as both their hands rested on those keys, hers in healing, his in guilt, they played the same note at the same time, across two different worlds of silence. A note that sounded not like sorrow, but like hope beginning again. Jake sat in the quiet music room, staring at the piano that had once echoed with Lily's trembling notes. The same room that had witnessed laughter, cruelty, silence, and tears now felt like a sacred place. Every day since Lily's collapse, he came here after classes, sitting quietly near the piano, sometimes pressing a single key, other times just listening to the air. He didn't know why, but something about this space connected him to her story, and maybe even to her mother. He had started leaving small things on the piano each day. A single flower, a folded note, a paper star, tiny apologies that no one else saw. It became his silent ritual, a way of saying, I'm still sorry. He didn't expect anyone to notice until one morning he found something new waiting there, a small drawing of a piano, and under it, in delicate handwriting, the words, Music never dies, it waits. He froze. Staring at it for a long moment, his heart skipped. Lily had been there, she'd returned. She was finally strong enough to face the place that broke her. That same afternoon, the school counselor announced that Lily had come back to classes. The halls buzzed with whispers. Some students were nervous to talk to her. Others felt guilty, but no one dared to laugh anymore. Something had changed in the air. Jake waited until the end of the day before going to see her. She was standing near the art room, sunlight glowing around her like a soft halo. She looked healthier, though her eyes still carried the quiet sadness of someone who'd seen too much. When she saw Jake, she smiled faintly. "You found my note," she said softly. He nodded. "Yeah," he replied. "You came back?" "I had to," she said. "I didn't want the piano to be a grave anymore." She looked down for a moment, then back up. "I wanted it to be a memory instead." Jake felt something stir inside him. Respect, admiration, and an ache of guilt that never fully left. "You're stronger than anyone I know," he said. She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "No. I'm just learning to live with the silence." They walked together to the music room. The afternoon light poured through the windows, painting the dust in gold. Lily paused at the doorway, her breath catching. It had been weeks since she'd stepped inside. The air smelled the same, faintly of varnish and old books. But it felt different now, softer, warmer. Because she wasn't alone this time. Jake watched as she approached the piano slowly. Her hand hovered above it, not quite touching. "It feels strange," she whispered, "like it's waiting for me." "Maybe it is," he said quietly. She smiled, just a little, and sat down. Her fingers trembled as they touched the keys. The sound that came out was soft, uncertain, but real. She pressed another key, then another, building a fragile melody. The same one she had played before. But this time, it didn't sound like goodbye, it sounded like healing. Jake listened in silence, his throat tight. Each note seemed to untie something inside both of them. The pain didn't vanish, but it changed. It became something beautiful, something worth remembering. When the last note faded, Lily looked at him. "Do you know what's strange?" she said. "When I play now, I still feel her. But it doesn't hurt as much. It feels like she's smiling instead of crying." Jake's voice was soft. "Maybe she is." They sat there for a while. Not needing words, the golden light dimmed slowly, and the sound of footsteps in the hallway faded until it was just them and the echo of her song. As they left the room together, Jake turned back for one last look at the piano. It no longer felt like a reminder of guilt, but a promise. A reminder that broken things could still make music. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk, staring at the small keyboard he'd been practicing on. The thought of Lily's soft melody filled his mind. He placed his fingers on the keys and began to mimic it. Slowly at first, then smoother. He wasn't good, not even close, but he tried. Each wrong note reminded him of her courage to play again. When he finished, he smiled faintly and whispered to himself, "She did it. She faced it." He turned to the small notebook beside him, the one where he had been writing his thoughts ever since the incident, and added a new line. "Forgiveness isn't something you ask for once, it's something you live every day." The next morning, when Lily entered the classroom, she found something on her desk, a folded paper with a single sentence written inside. "Your music taught me how to listen." She looked around but didn't see who left it, though she didn't need to, in the days that followed. Lily began to play more often, not in front of crowds but for herself. The music room became a safe space again. Sometimes Jake would sit nearby, pretending to study while quietly listening. He never interrupted, never joked, he just listened, letting her melody fill the silence he once created. One afternoon, the school announced a small concert for charity. The principal asked Lily if she would play. At first she refused, her hands shaking. "I can't," she said, "not in front of people." But Jake gently encouraged her. "You don't have to play for them," he said. "Play for her." Lily thought about it for a long time. Then she nodded. "Maybe," she whispered. That evening, Jake stayed late, helping clean the music room. He placed a small framed photo on the piano. It was of a mother and daughter smiling. Lily's mother, copied from her diary's page. The next day, when Lily saw it, she froze, tears filling her eyes. She didn't ask how he got it, she just whispered, "Thank you." And when the concert day arrived, the auditorium was full. No one laughed. No one whispered. Everyone waited. Lily sat at the piano, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. Then she began to play. Her song filled the room, not with sadness, but with light. Every note carried love, pain, forgiveness, and rebirth. And in the crowd, Jake listened, smiling quietly, knowing that this time, it wasn't a cruel joke, it was a miracle. and as the final note faded into silence, everyone stood and clapped. But Lily didn't look at them, she looked up, whispering softly to the air. That was for you. And somewhere deep inside, Jake felt the music heal him too, one note at a time. The evening after Lily's concert, the entire school buzzed with her name. Teachers whispered about how she played like an angel, and students who once laughed now spoke of her with quiet awe. But Lily didn't care about the fame or praise. She hadn't played for them. She played for her mother, for herself, for peace. When the applause had faded, she walked off the stage trembling, not from fear this time, but from release. Jake waited backstage, his heart full when she saw him. She smiled, eyes glassy. I did it, she whispered. He smiled back. You did more than that, you brought her back. The next morning, Lily sat alone at the old piano in the school's music room. The same piano that once carried her pain now held something softer, gentler. She traced her fingers along the keys, whispering thank you, not to the piano, but to her mother, to Jake, and maybe even to herself. Jake found her there, as he always did. He knocked lightly on the doorframe. You're early, he said. She chuckled softly. I couldn't sleep. It's strange, before I couldn't even walk past this room. Now it feels like home again. He stepped closer, looking at her hands resting on the keys. You were amazing last night, he said. Everyone's still talking about it. She shook her head. I didn't do it for them. I know, he said quietly. That's why it mattered. For a moment they sat in silence. The sunlight made the dust sparkle in the air. The piano stood between them, not as a wall this time, but as a bridge, connecting two people who had changed each other's lives. After a few moments, Lily spoke. I found something after the concert. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small folded paper. This was under the piano bench, Jake frowned. What is it? She handed it to him. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was elegant, a bit faded. It read, For Lily, when she finds her strength again, love. Mom. Jake blinked, stunned. Your mom wrote this? Lily nodded, tears shining in her eyes. She must have hidden it before she got too sick. I never knew it was there. Jake stared at the words again. She knew you'd come back to play, he whispered. Lily smiled faintly. Yeah, maybe she did. She looked down at the piano, pressing one soft note. The sound was like a heartbeat, steady and alive. You know, she said quietly, I used to hate these keys. I thought they betrayed me. Every note reminded me of losing her, but now, every note feels like she's answering. Jake nodded, feeling something stir deep inside him. You turned grief into music, he said. That's something most people can't do. Lily looked up at him. Maybe that's what music really is, she said softly. Pain, love, memory, all turning into something beautiful. That night, Jake wrote her mother's note in his own journal, adding beneath it, when you heal someone else, you heal yourself too. In the weeks that followed, Lily's world began to change. The girl who once hid behind silence now tutored younger students, teaching them piano with gentle patience. Every student who sat beside her felt something different, like the music wasn't just sound, but emotion being shared. She'd smile and tell them, don't worry about the notes, feel it first. Jake often visited during these lessons, pretending he was just passing by but staying to listen. He loved watching her laugh with her students, loved seeing her alive again. It reminded him that second chances weren't just given. They were earned. One day while Lily was teaching, the school principal entered with a soft smile. Lily, the City Youth Orchestra invited you to perform next month, he said. They heard about your concert. They want you to play your song again. The students gasped, cheering for her, but Lily just froze, unsure. I don't know, she said, her voice trembling. That's a big stage. Jake stepped forward. You can do it, he said firmly. You already did once, this time do it for her again. But also for yourself. She stared at him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. The day of the performance came quickly. The auditorium was massive, filled with hundreds of faces. Lily stood backstage, her hands cold. Jake found her there. Hey, he said gently. Remember what you told me? Don't think about the crowd, just feel it. She smiled nervously. You remember that? Every word, he said. Now go make them feel what you felt. As she stepped onto the stage, the lights blinded her for a moment. She sat down at the grand piano, her reflection gleaming in its polished surface. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began. The melody flowed like water, soft at first, then deeper, richer. Every note carried warmth, grief and hope. The audience fell silent. Some with tears in their eyes, the sound was alive. It told her mother's story, her own story, and even Jake's. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, but she didn't hear it right away. She looked upward, eyes closed, and smiled through her tears, whispering, "I did it, Mom." Backstage, Jake waited with flowers. When she saw him, she laughed. "You're predictable," she said. "Maybe," he grinned. "But you're extraordinary." She looked at him, her eyes shining. "You know, I used to think my story ended when I lost her," she said softly. "But maybe it just began when you made that stupid joke." He laughed quietly. "Then I guess I'm glad I was stupid." She shook her head, smiling warmly. "You weren't stupid. You were just human." Jake looked at her for a long moment, then said, "And so were you, Lily. But now you're something more. You're her music." Living on, that night when she got home, she placed her mother's note on the piano, next to a fresh flower, and whispered, "Thank you for never letting go." Then she began to play again, not to remember the pain, but to celebrate that she survived it. And somewhere in the echo of that song, it felt like her mother's laughter returned, soft and real, carried on every note that filled the quiet night. The night after the grand concert, the city streets glowed with soft golden lights. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving small puddles that reflected the stars. Lily walked home slowly, her hands still trembling from the performance. But this time it wasn't fear, it was disbelief. She had done it again. She had stood on a stage under bright lights and shared her mother's memory with the world. And the world had listened when she reached her apartment. She unlocked the door quietly. The place was small but warm. Every corner still carried traces of her mother. The framed photo near the piano, the floral curtains, the faint scent of lavender. She placed her bag on the couch and walked to the piano that stood near the window. The moonlight touched its black surface, making it shine softly. She ran her fingers over the lid and whispered, "Did you hear me, Mom? Did you hear my song?" The room felt quiet but comforting, as if answering her in silence. She sat down and played a single note. It echoed through the apartment. Gentle and lonely, she smiled through her tears. "I know you did." The next morning, she received a message from Jake. "Meet me at the old music room after class. I've got something to show you." She smiled, curious, and replied, "All right. Don't make me regret it." When she arrived at school, the hallways were filled with smiles and congratulations. Everyone wanted to talk to her. Students who once mocked her now spoke with admiration. Some even asked for piano lessons. She was kind to them all. But part of her still felt strange about the attention. She didn't want to be a celebrity. She just wanted peace. After class, she walked to the music room. The door was closed, but she heard soft sounds inside. Not piano. Something else. It was Jake sitting at the keyboard, fumbling his way through a melody. It was clumsy and uneven, but recognizable. The same melody she had played during her first performance, the one that had silenced the laughter. He looked up when she entered, his face turning red. "You weren't supposed to hear that yet," he said quickly. She laughed. "Too late." Jake scratched his neck nervously. I've been learning. I wanted to understand how you felt when you played. And maybe be a part of that somehow." Lily smiled softly, walking closer. "That's sweet," she said. "And brave," he chuckled. "Mostly embarrassing." She shook her head. "No, it's honest." For a moment they stood in silence, the air filled with soft light and the faint hum of the piano. Then Jake said quietly, "You know, the first day I teased you, I thought I was being funny. But that joke changed everything. I never thought one moment could define a person's life. But it did for both of us." Lily looked down. "Sometimes pain teaches faster than kindness," she said gently. "But what matters is what we do with the lesson." He nodded slowly, then reached into his bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "I wrote something for you." She raised an eyebrow, teasing. "Don't tell me it's another apology." He grinned. "No, I ran out of those." "It's something else." Lily unfolded it and read silently. It was a short letter written in uneven handwriting. "Dear Lily, you once said music comes from the heart, but I think yours comes from somewhere higher. You reminded me that people are fragile, but that fragility can create the strongest beauty. You didn't just play music, you healed it. Thank you for letting me listen." Jake. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening. This is beautiful, she whispered. He shrugged, pretending to look casual. It's true. Lily folded the letter carefully and placed it in her notebook. I'll keep it, she said softly. Like her note. They spent the rest of the afternoon playing small melodies together, sometimes in rhythm, sometimes off, but always laughing, for the first time in months. Lily laughed without pain. The sound filled the room like sunlight. As the sun began to set, Jake stood up. You know, he said, when you played last night, I realized something. You weren't just playing for your mom. You were playing for everyone who's ever lost someone and forgot how to feel. Lily looked at him quietly, her eyes soft. Maybe, she said, but I think I was playing for myself too. To remember that it's okay to live again, he nodded. That's the bravest song you'll ever play. When she left that evening. The air outside was cool. The sky was painted in orange and pink. She looked back through the window one last time. Jake was still sitting at the piano, pressing keys slowly, smiling when he got one right. She smiled to herself, whispering, You're learning. Later that night, Lily sat by her own piano again, opening both her mother's note and Jake's letter. She placed them side by side on the stand. Two voices, she murmured. One from the past, one from the present. Then she began to play, not the song of sadness, not the melody of loss, but something new. The notes were lighter, freer, filled with warmth and quiet strength. Each chord felt like turning a new page in her life. Across town, Jake sat by his small keyboard, trying to follow the tutorial on his phone. When he played, he smiled, because he could almost feel her music through the distance, as if their melodies were connected somehow. And at that same moment, as Lily's song drifted through her open window and out into the night, it carried something invisible but powerful. Hope, forgiveness, and the reminder that even the deepest wounds can one day sing again. That night, she wrote in her diary, I thought my story ended when I lost her, but maybe she left the music behind so I could find myself. And maybe some people enter your life not to hurt you, but to change your melody forever. Then she closed the book, smiled softly to the dark and whispered, Good night, Mom. And as the moon rose higher, the piano keys gleamed faintly, waiting for tomorrow's song. The world around Lily seemed to move slower now, calmer, as if the storm that once raged inside her had finally passed. A month had gone by since her concert with the youth orchestra, and her life had begun to find rhythm again. People still talked about her performance, about the girl who played sorrow into beauty. But for Lily, that night wasn't about fame or praise. It was about peace and what came after. Every morning she woke up early, opened the curtains to let the sunlight in, and sat by her piano, the same one her mother once played. Now it didn't feel like a shadow from the past, but a bridge that connected her heart to every sunrise. She often played quietly, her fingers gliding through soft tunes that told stories only she could understand. Each note was a step forward, a reminder that she had survived. Jake still visited every few days, sometimes bringing coffee, sometimes just showing up and sitting quietly while she played. He didn't need to speak much. His presence alone said everything. Their friendship had become something steady, something built not from laughter or flirtation, but from shared pain and understanding. One afternoon, as the rain tapped gently on the window, Jake arrived soaked, holding a small wrapped box. You're late, Lily said with a teasing smile. I was starting to think you ran away. He grinned, wiping his wet hair. Almost did. But then I remembered you'd never forgive me. She laughed softly. You're right, he handed her the box. Open it, he said. Inside was a small pendant shaped like a musical note, silver and simple. It's nothing fancy, he added quickly, but it reminded me of you. Lily turned it in her fingers, the metal catching the light. It's beautiful, she said quietly. Thank you. She placed it around her neck, the pendant resting near her heart. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain's rhythm filled the silence, a soft melody on its own. Then Jake said, You know, I've been thinking. That sounds dangerous, she teased. He chuckled. Probably, but hear me out. He leaned forward slightly. You should teach music full-time, not just for the school, but for real. Open a place where kids can come learn, not just to play, but to feel what you feel when you touch those keys. Lily blinked, surprised. Me? Teach full-time? Why not? he said. "You're already doing it. You help others find their voice through music." "You gave me mine." She looked at him, realizing he meant it. The thought scared her at first, but also warmed her. "A music studio," she said slowly. "It sounds crazy." Jake grinned. "So did playing in front of thousands. Remember how that turned out?" She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You never stop pushing me, do you?" He smiled. "Not when it's worth it." That night, after he left, she sat at her piano again. Her fingers hovered above the keys. The pendant around her neck gleamed softly. She thought about the idea. A small studio, maybe in her mother's name. A place where music could heal others like it healed her. She pressed a single note, then whispered, "Maybe it's time." Weeks passed and the dream began to take shape. With Jake's help, she found a small, quiet place near the town square. A cozy space with big windows. A few instruments and walls painted in soft cream. She named it the Harmony Room, and beneath the sign, in small letters, she added, "In memory of my mother." The day it opened, she stood by the door, greeting every child and parent with a smile. Her heart raced, but it wasn't fear, it was gratitude. Each face that entered reminded her of what she'd lost, and what she'd found again. Jake arrived last, carrying a small bouquet of lilies. "For your first day," he said, "and for the name that started it all." She took the flowers, smiling. "You remembered?" "I never forget the things that matter," he said. Later, as the first class began, Lily watched the children gather around the piano. Their laughter filled the room, the same kind of laughter that once haunted her. But now it healed her. Instead, she began the lesson, her voice calm and warm. "Okay, everyone. Today we don't play to be perfect. We play to feel. Close your eyes, touch the keys, and let your heart speak." The small fingers pressed the piano softly, producing imperfect notes, but the sound was beautiful. It was full of life, full of beginnings. From the back of the room, Jake watched quietly. His eyes softened as he saw her smiling. Radiant, free. He knew her mother would be proud. As the class ended, Lily walked over to him, wiping a tear from her cheek. "You did it," he said quietly. She smiled. "No," she whispered. "We did it." That evening, after everyone left, she sat alone in the studio. The setting sun painted everything in gold. She opened her diary, the one that had once been filled with pain, and wrote her final entry. "The day I was forced to play, I thought my life had ended. But that song was just the beginning. Sometimes the cruelest moments break us open, so the music inside can finally be heard." She closed the book, her eyes glistening. Then she placed it beside a framed photo of her mother and whispered, "I kept playing just like you told me to." Outside, the night deepened. The lights of the Harmony Room glowed softly through the glass. And inside, Lily began to play again, not to remember loss, but to celebrate life. Each note carried laughter, memory, and love. Each chord whispered forgiveness, and when the final note faded, it left behind something stronger than sorrow. It left peace. Because the music that had once broken her heart now filled it completely, and through it her mother's song would never end.